New Olympus, new care package rotation, and weapons in the crafter? Season 12 has some really interesting changes to the game's loot pool that have definitely affected weapon strengths in this season. And it's time for us to dive into everything you need to know. What's up guys, it's Valued, and by the end of this video, you will have a full-fledged tier list to know how your favorite guns are stacking up in the current meta. But with all that out of the way, let's get right into it. So, if we're starting from the top, I'd be lying if we didn't start with the care package weapons. The Kraber, Spitfire, and Scout remain in the package, with the Volt coming in to replace the Alternator. Every one of these guns are incredibly strong, and if you come across any of them in a package, you definitely should look to drop your secondary weapon and add these powerhouses to your loadout. Okay, so with the OP weapons out of the way, it's time to talk about some weapons that are absolute powerhouses right now. Right at the top, we have the R301. This gun is too dang consistent for it not to be talked about in the top spot. It's got great damage, fire rate, and low recoil, making it the most consistent gun in the game. While it doesn't hang close range the way its heavy weapon counterpart does, it's an absolute laser, so that entirely makes up for it. If you're looking for arguably the easiest gun to bring value to fights, the R301 has you covered. Speaking of the heavy ammo counterpart, the Flatline still finds itself up there as a top tier weapon. This season, it was actually moved into the crafter, allowing you to make it at any replicator station. On top of this, it received a 1 damage nerf, but let's be honest, that's not gonna hold this gun down. Throw a clip on this thing and it's instantly an amazing close and medium range weapon. And with it being in the crafter, it's odd to not find it on the ground, but it gives you a guaranteed way to get the gun in every single game you play. Also retaining the top tier status after a nerf, we have the Triple Take. Even after losing a few damage per shot, the Triple Take is an incredible medium range flex weapon that can take fights at range or up close. The new hop-up kinetic feeder adds a bit of extra speed to the gun by speeding up the chokes and adding back ammo to the clip when sliding. It's a nice little quality of life that does a bit to offset the damage nerf. An add-on to the Volt going into the care package, and this is hands down the best ground loot energy weapon for this season. And rounding out the S tier of this tier list, we have the Mastiff and Peacekeeper, two incredibly powerful shotgun options. Neither of them received any nerfs this season, with the Peacekeeper gaining access to the kinetic feeder hop-up as well. These shotties are both top tier weapons, and if you can get comfortable with their unique pellet patterns and timings, you can deal more damage with these weapons than any other weapon in the game. Shotties let you get this damage while jiggling doorways and other movement to avoid damage, making shotties super strong when they're meta. Before we move on to the A tier, what good are any of these weapons without great aim? If you're sick of missing your shots and are looking for a better way to train than the firing range, then look no further. AimLab is the only game you need to see consistent results. And did I mention it's free to play? Check it out today at the top link in the description and see the AimLab difference. Moving into the A tier, we're starting off with the Wingman. While this is a really tough gun to get down, if you can hit consistent shots, it has big damage. This has been a lobby stomping weapon in the right hands for a very long time. Its single fire and small mag size makes it a much more risky weapon compared to others in this section of the list, but with how high the ceiling is, you've got to have it up there in the A tier. Also finding themselves in the A tier is everyone's favorite LMG, the Rampage. Even after a very slight nerf during last split, this thing is still an absolute monster. If you can manage to hang on to a thermite or two, revving this gun up turns it into one of the most deadly weapons in the game with good fire rate, damage, and the ability to knock down doors. This being said, it can feel a bit lacking when it's not revved, and this weapon really wants to have a barrel stabilizer and some other attachments before it really comes online. Once you get used to the recoil and slow fire rate though, you'll be doing a ton of work with this gun even without the thermite charge. With the Spitfire still in the care package, the Rampage is definitely still the king of LMGs. Moving into some of the more rapid fire weapons, we have the R99 and the Car SMG. Both of these submachine guns are in a really solid spot right now. They have good damage and fire rate, making them lethal up close. This being said, they also have heavy recoil, and while it's something you can learn to control or get a barrel stabilizer to help with, they definitely prefer to be up close. You'll need to stay mindful of how strong shotguns are though, and make sure you aren't just face checking someone with a PK shot waiting for you. But if you can manage to hit most of a clip on these guns, you're going to be doing some solid damage. And with the Volt going into the care package, these two guns have crept out from its shadow and are ready to take the center stage as the best SMGs. But who can forget about the Prowler when talking about SMGs? I know controller players don't. This 5-round burst close-range heavy weapon absolutely shreds. The burst lets you pre-fire corners effectively, and the raw damage per bullet will surprise you when you manage to land a full burst. This is one of the best weapons in the game, especially if you play on controller, with aim assist helping that full burst track the target. But M&K players can also get a ton of value out of it as well. It is a little bit less flexible than the R99 or the Car, but in the right hands, it's just as lethal. Moving into the B tier, we are on an SMG train, and we have the Alternator. While it's not as strong as it was in the package, the Alternator is a strong, consistent, close-range SMG with less recoil than its counterparts. With the Volt no longer being floor looted, the light and heavy SMGs have risen up to take its place. However, along with this, we have the Alternator falling just a bit in priority behind these other subs. It's not that this weapon isn't as strong or isn't good to use, it's just that it gets edged out by these other weapons just slightly in a different category for each. The biggest of these being raw DPS, and the Alternator lacks a bit in damage since it's one of the most accurate subs that we've talked about. If you've been waiting for this gun to be back in the loot pool, you will have a great time using it, and I personally love it. But if you aren't an OG Alternator fan, rest easy knowing you can keep running your other favorite SMGs. Now, I'm not sure if you guys are going to agree with this one, but the 3030 repeater is up next. And with the Scout still in the care package, this remains the go-to single-shot tactical rifle. It does hide in the shadow of weapons further up the list that can fill its role, like the triple take, but it's definitely a strong weapon in the right hands. If you can get the pacing down for the shots, getting the most shots off at max charge as possible, the damage is really solid and it's incredibly accurate. Add on to this the little quality of life change Shattercap's got, making it only activated when hip firing, and this gun is in a pretty good spot. If you're looking for a medium range precision weapon that has some really unique features that allow it to be quite strong, you can't go wrong with the 3030 in this season. The Charge Rifle is the first true sniper rifle on this list, and it's largely because it's the easiest to use. This thing is still an Evo charging monster, with the hit scan letting you hit enemies from light years away. It's tough not to at least hit a little bit of damage with these shots, and if you manage to trace enemies and get full damage, this thing pumps. Olympus isn't the best for snipers, but if you get in a good position early on in the game and you're looking to hold down an area, soften up a team, or just charge your evos a bit, the Charge Rifle has got you covered. And next up, we have the Hemlock sliding into the B tier, with this burst weapon being in a pretty stable spot for a while now. It doesn't have the raw damage of its AR counterparts, but it makes up for it in its accuracy and fire rate. Now, you really don't want to get caught in a close range fight with this gun if you can help it, but if you manage to get some good attachments, the Hemlock is a solid mid-range gun. If you've been struggling with the other ARs or you want to give a burst weapon a go, the Hemlock might not be a bad choice. And guys, I'm sad to say it, but next up we have the LStar. This once broken LMG that I loved so much just isn't the powerhouse that it once was, but it definitely isn't a slouch. With the Volt being removed from ground loot, this is now the best automatic energy weapon because of how little it takes to be useful. If you learn to play with the overheat cooldown to prevent having to reload, the uptime for this gun is massive. This is a great close to medium range flex weapon, allowing you to turn a lot of fights if you manage its uptime properly. If you're an LStar lover, you can definitely run this gun in Season 12. Just make sure you have something for medium to long range so you're not stuck trying to take long distance gunfights. And rounding out our B tier, we have the last two snipers, the Sentinel and the Longbow. Both of these guns deal big damage at good range. The Sentinel lets you play the traditional sniper role, and if you have a couple of extra cells to feed it, you can actually hit some really big numbers with this gun. The Longbow is a bit more of a closer range sniper. While you can definitely hit really long range shots, it trades raw damage for more bullets in a clip and a higher fire rate. This weapon can now only be found in the crafter, which makes it easier to find, but also tougher to get your hands on in some situations. It's a great gun to swap over to if your secondary just isn't cutting it, or if you're moving into a long-range circle. Both of these guns are harder to use than the charge rifle, but their payoff is really high if you can master them. If you're looking to play that traditional sniper role, the Sentinel is a solid option. And if you're looking for more of a 3x medium to long-range sniper that gets a lot of shot opportunities, the Longbow might be the move for you. Starting off the C tier strong, we have two weapons that are really dependent on the same hop-up, the Havoc and the Devotion. Both of these weapons fully kitted are super strong and definitely don't belong in the C tier. Now, the reason they're here is because without the turbocharger, they're not so great. And the issue is just how rare that turbocharger really is. If you kill an enemy with one of these weapons fully kitted, feel free to nab that thing and fry some players for the rest of the game. However, the risk of not finding that hop-up to remove the wind-up time is too high. And if you commit to these weapons early on and don't find one, you're going to be missing out on a lot of power. This is why these guns don't find themselves higher on this list. Now, if this was a list of how strong each weapon is fully kitted, they would be way higher. But since we're trying to pick the guns that you're going to consistently use to win more fights and games, the Havoc and Devotion find themselves in the C tier. This one pains me to say, but the fallen king of shotguns is up next. The EVA 8 was the go-to shotty for so long, but after massive nerfs season after season, it's just overshadowed by the Mastiff and PK in every single way possible. You can definitely still get some knocks with this thing, but you should really look to learn one of the other shotguns if you want to make the most out of this weapon class. The damage is just too low these days to compete with the other shotguns up close. But if you're in a fight with a lot of the automatic weapons in the game, you can still come out on top. Alright, so moving on, we have some sidearm. The RE45, Mozambique, and P2020 have all gained access to hammer point rounds here in Season 12, making them deal big damage to enemy HP. These weapons are in the C tier because you really don't want to be keeping them throughout the entire game. This being said, these can still be strong guns off drop to help you win a POI, and they can actually work through the mid game if you use them properly. But when it comes to late mid game and late game in general, you want to have a Mastiff or a PK in my opinion. Now, all this being said, these guns actually pump when they have hammer points, and they make for a pretty interesting sidearm. And finishing off the C tier, we have all my Legolas mains using the bow check. The shatter cap changes were a nice change for this weapon, giving it a viable close range damage without having to toggle to a different mode. However, this thing is still too hard to get high value out of, and the payoff is often not worth it. The fire rate is slow, damage isn't that crazy, and you have to be a pretty well trained archer to win a single game with this gun. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a really fun weapon to use, but if you're looking for competitive advantages, then I would advise looking higher up on the tier list. And that's gonna do it for the Season 12 weapon tier list. Remember guys, every weapon can get downs and win you games. But this list should help you decide if those weapons you've been running are actually holding you back at all, and give you some strong options to try out if you're looking to switch up your loadouts. Make sure to drop a sub and a like if you enjoyed today's video. As always, it's been your boy Valued, and I'll see you guys in the next one.